we're going to talk about entering data and recoding data. So again, we have the data view and variable view. I'll leave it up to you to remember how to open up SPSS. You'll have a blank spreadsheet with nothing in it. And so we'll go to variable view, and if you recall from the first video, I'm going to follow the same pattern, and I'll have ID. I'll label it ID. It's numeric, and the measure is irrelevant. I'm just going to have it be a person's identification number. And then age, again numeric, and this will be age. There'll be no values because the measure is going to be scale, interval measure. And we'll have satisfaction, and again numeric. And if you recall, we had from the first video, satisfied with lunch. And in this case, we will have values. So the value of 0 we'll put for not at all. 1, somewhat. And 2, very. And now this is going to be a ordinal measure. And let's try another one, living, and we'll keep it numeric. Where do you live? And as you can recall, in the labeling, you can write full sentences if you want. The name has to be, you can't have any spaces, and you can't start with a number. And you should try to keep it short as possible, but the label allows you a chance to really describe for yourself what the variable is all about. And for living, let's say that 0 is a city, a 1 is a town or a suburb, and 2 is country or rural. The reason why I want to add this is because this measure would now be nominal. Because if you notice, there's no particular order. These are categories, but there's no particular order. Unlike satisfied with lunch, which had categories, but there is an order. Not at all would come before somewhat, which comes before very. And that's, again, those both are different from age, which is scale, a continuous interval ratio value. The other variable that I added the first time was thoughts, and I guess it's worth adding again. And we decided to make that one a string, which means that we could put fuller sentences into it. And because they're going to be fuller sentences, you might want to leave a little bit more space. So we'll make the width 80 to really allow there to be more space to write some thoughts. Otherwise, it will truncate or cut off the thoughts. Now we have the ability to add the data. You may have gotten this data because you've done some kind of survey. And typically, I like to do the ID column when I'm entering data from a survey, because that way, if I do mess up in entering any kind of data, I can find the exact survey instrument and make a correction. And there's often errors in typing. So say I have my person survey number 1, and I'll write the 1 also on the survey. And let's say the person is 24 years old, and now their satisfaction level was not at all, which you may or may not recall was given a value of 0. Now, this little tool here, the 1 and the A, if you press that, it actually allows you to toggle between the numerical value and the category and the actual category that it is. It's nice. While it's helpful to see the not at all, it is a lot harder to enter the data, because when you're entering data in this version, you have to do the drop down, while if you enter it in this version, you can just put the number. Living situation was, again, 0 was urban. So let's just say this person lives in the city. Again, you'll see that when you toggle, you can see the difference. And thoughts, let's say this seems to be about lunch because it's with satisfaction with lunch. So just I only eat grilled cheese. So my point of doing this is that it allows you to see that here, because it's a string variable noted by that A, you can put whole sentences, you can put whatever you want there. Again, it's only limited by how wide you make it. And so you would continue to enter for each person whatever was the appropriate response. Fast forward, I entered 20 different people. I didn't put too much into the thoughts because we're not really going to focus on doing that for the recode, but it gives you the idea of how to enter. Again, you start with an ID, and I'm giving you an example of entering an interval measure, an ordinal measure, and a nominal measure. Once again, you can toggle back and forth to get that different kinds of information. And so already, as soon as I have this, you've already got some tools of what you can do. I often like to do frequency distribution tables to make sure I didn't code anything wrong and just sort of understand it. So again, this is an SPSS output. It's not age is not a frequency table I would want to use because, again, a frequency distribution table should be a simple way of looking at information and summarizing it. And this is just too much information. It's also incorrect for a frequency distribution table because if you see, a real frequency distribution table would not exclude numbers in the middle. So please don't confuse this kind of frequency table to the kind you would actually need to use when you're reporting out data. Obviously, when we're dealing with ordinal data or nominal data, the frequency distribution table makes a lot more sense. But we're going to figure out how to recode this so that it can make more sense. But one thing that's important to know is that we've got these numbers from about 10 to 65. So if we were to actually have this as a real frequency distribution table with each age being a different row, that would give us about 55 rows that we're dealing with, which is obviously way too much for a frequency distribution table. So we like to think of a way of recoding the data so that we can actually look at it a little bit better in a frequency distribution. And there might be other uses that we want that it would be much more helpful to have it a little bit more categorized. I'm going to show you the different ways to recode so that we can look at age in different formats. So there's no need to recode satisfaction or living situations because they're already categorical. Recoding generally happens for two reasons. One is to take an interval ratio measure like age and make them categorical. The other is when we might want to combine two different variables. So let's start with making age categorical. Once again, since it was about 55 rows and a nice easy frequency distribution table would have about 10, I would consider that groups of 5 would be the most logical. And in this case, if we go back to the output, the youngest age was 10. So we can start there. So you go to transform, and now we're going to go to this, it's called compute variable, where we're going to create a variable that we compute from existing variables. So our target variable, we're going to create a new variable. We're going to call it age2. We don't want to get rid of our age variable, we just want to create a new one. So let's say that age2, since we want to make it categories, I'm going to make the lowest category 0. That's often a common thing to do when you're making categories, is that the lowest category instead of being 1 is 0. But it's really up to me, and that's what I want to do. And so I'm going to say that age2 equals 0. I'm going to click if. include if case satisfied conditions. So I'm going to click on that, take age and move it over. And I'm going to explain the situation in which age should equal 0. I'm going to have age equal 0 if age equals, so we're using 5-year increments and the youngest is 10. So if age is less than or equal to 15, and hit continue. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to paste this. What this gives me is a whole nother screen that's new to you, which is called the syntax screen. So we have the data set screen, we have the output screen, and now we have the syntax screen. And the syntax screen is very useful and important to use and save because it allows us to keep track of the things we've done. And if things go wrong, you can go back to your syntax screen and rerun something and make it all right. So what you see here can be read as a sentence. So essentially it's saying if the age variable is less than or equal to 15, then make the new variable age2 equal 0. So now I'm going to go back to transform and compute variable. And I'm going to say, okay, now age2 equals 1 if age is, so that was less than or equal to 15. So maybe I'll say greater or equal to 16, greater or equal to 16, and I have this and symbol, and age is less than or equal to 20. And let's paste that too. Now the execute, I have to have execute at the end to run something, but I'm going to take it out because I have it at the very bottom. I'm going to move it down too. So now I'm telling it a second command. I'm saying now, if the age variable that already exists is greater or equal to 16 and less than or equal to 20, which is essentially that age is between the ages of 16 and 20, now I want age2 to equal 1. And what's nice is I have all of the information I need to recode the rest of age2. So I can copy that and paste it. And I could say, well, all right, if it's greater or equal to 21 and less than or equal to 25, now I want age2 to equal 2. And I could say, and if it's greater or equal to 26 and less than or equal to 30, I'm going to make age2 equal 3. Let's just look at what we've just done. So there's always a sandwich. The data set activate says which data set to use. In this case, you only have one data set open. You also can use this to identify which data set. This becomes more important if you have multiple data sets open. Then we have all the recodes we want it to do. And we got to be careful that we don't overlap or confuse it. So I always like to check it over. So that's 16 to 20, 21 to 25, 26 to 30, 31 to 35, 36 to 40, 41 to 45, 46 to 50, and over 50. Oh, see? So there's my problem. That I have to get rid of the equal sign. It can only be over 50 because 50 is already included in H7. So once I have all of this, I'll highlight it. And this green button is the Go button. So I'm going to run selection. And this, I look in the output and it just, what's nice about this is it reminds me what I just did, but it also will tell me if I have an error. Sometimes it's nice, I can take it and move it closer. And now let me do, I'll call this age recode. And let's do the values before I forget. So 0 was 15 and under. 1 was 16 to 20. 2 was 21 to 25. 3 was 26 to 30. 4 was 31 to 35. 5 was 36 to 40. 6 was 41 to 45. 7 was 46 to 50. And last but not least, 8 was over 50. Hit OK. And so now what's nice is we have age and age 2 together. And I can toggle this, and I can double check that I've got it right. So person who's 24 is between 21 and 25, 45 between 41 and 45, 15 and under, over 50. So I can see that I recoded it correctly. So it's really important to do this check to make sure that you've got your recode done correctly. So what's nice now with age 2 is if I want to get a frequency, and let's reset this, and I could put age 2 over. Let me just, for the example, I'm going to put age again and age 2 to show you the difference. And so you see, again, age is very difficult to really look at as a frequency table. It's not really correct because it doesn't have a 12-year-old, a 14, a 15-year-old, or all the ages in between. And if it did, it would just have a lot of zeros and it would look very confusing. And now we have this recode, which makes it so much easier to understand our sample in this kind of format. So that's the simplest type of recoding. There are a lot of options. If you go to compute, you'll see that there's all of these different functions that can be used to do different types of recoding. You can do arithmetic with dates. You can search out certain words and terms. It gets very more complex than we are going to need for this particular class. But if you are ever to use SPSS in a much more sophisticated way in the future, just know that there are a number of different ways. If you're familiar with Excel, a lot of these different kinds of functions are similar to what Excel has. And that's recoding.